thinking people are stalking you, never eating again, and causing your heart to stop working. I'm your host Jay Duran, and we have all of this on today's most amazing top 10 list. Coming in number 10, we have combing the history. One of the worst parts of not being able to sleep is that it will increase your paranoia to levels that you didn't know were possible. Like, you know that feeling you get when you think that people are laughing at you when you hear a group of people laugh? Well, what if you had that feeling all the time? Someone who goes by the Reddit handle Belinda12 wrote about a struggle they had with insomnia that made them think that everyone was out to get them all the time, and they had to hide from everyone. They said that insomnia was something that they always struggled with and took medication for, but even when they were medicated, they still had trouble staying asleep, and the little bit of sleep they would get would never feel like it gave them any sort of rest. They started to get this weird feeling that someone was stalking them through social media. Every time they got a friend request that they didn't recognize or someone liked their picture that they didn't know, they would start to feel anxious. Belinda12 eventually started to stay up all night so they could comb through all their history to see who had been looking at their social media. They wanted to find out who this person was. They would stay up late every night looking through every profile, everyone who ever interacted with them on social media. They would only get a couple of hours sleep every other night and then head off to work. The people they worked with could see that their health was getting worse, and eventually someone reached out to find out what was going on. This person helped Belinda12 seek professional help, and they wrote if it wasn't for this coworker, they think they might have gone insane. Next on the list, we have vanishing. The person who wrote this next post never suffered from insomnia, but had a friend who would struggle with it constantly. They always talked about how they could never get enough sleep, and they always looked haggard. Eventually, they noticed that their friends stopped coming out as much, which made sense. They were always tired. But something else started happening. This person was slowly deleting all of their social media. They would delete photos at first, remove some friends, unfollow some people, and then eventually just started deleting entire pages. Now, this isn't crazy. It's a pretty normal thing for people to get fed up with social media and close everything down. It's not like social media is the be-all end-all, but now there was only one way for this person to reach out to their friend, and one day they just stopped answering their phone. So our writer went to find their friend. They came to their house and no one was there. They looked around the house and all the windows were covered with newspaper. Eventually they found a way to sneak in and there was nothing in the house. Like, they just got up and moved without telling anyone, and they never saw their friend again. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Next on the list, we have messing with their fertility. This is something very scary and true. If you get too sleep deprived, it can stop you from having kids because it messes around with your fertility. I read a report online about a woman who was struggling to have children for almost 2 years. She had 2 miscarriages and she was about to give up on having children. But she went to a health specialist who helped her with her sleep cycle, and she was able to fix her issues with her fertility and have children. Next on the list, we have sickness. One thing we don't think about is how good sleep is for your body. Some people will just brush off sleep because they're on the grind all the time, and they will reject something that is super important for their health. If you mess around with your sleep too much, it can increase your chances of Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, and a ton of other diseases. So it should be no surprise that someone on Reddit wrote about the struggle they had with their health because of insomnia. They said it had started with them just catching a cold every now and again. It would be normal for them to get sick about once a month, but they had a very taxing job and they needed to stay up late into the night to get everything done. This was their life and there wasn't much they could do about it. Eventually this got worse. They had constant headaches. Every other day their head would start pounding, but they didn't want to stop and rest. They kept pushing through their lack of sleep and increasing sickness and just started medicating the problem. This turned into ulcers and they had such intense stomach pains that they eventually had to leave work. The time off allowed them to rest and so many of their health problems went away. After this, they switched jobs and moved on to something that wouldn't threaten their health. Their doctor told them if they had pushed much further, they might have given themselves something serious like Crohn's disease. Next on the list, we have creating an imaginary friend. This story is wild. I snagged this one off of a health forum, and it was someone who talked about how their insomnia got so bad that they had a fit where they stayed up for 3 days. During this time, they started to have waking dreams. This is where your dream reality will meld with the real world. world. This will cause people to lose touch with reality around them. They created an imaginary friend that they thought was a real person. This creation would tell them what to do and was feeding their paranoia. It kept telling them that they shouldn't go to sleep or someone was going to come for them in their sleep. It told them the police were outside waiting to take them to an insane asylum and they couldn't leave their house. They thought that the parked cars right outside their house were all CIA and FBI. The reason that they were having a fit of insomnia was because they'd been taking massive doses of Adderall, and this made it so they couldn't fall asleep. Eventually they ran out of the drug, and because they were too paranoid to go outside, they never went to go get more, and they passed out. When they woke up, they felt as if they had just woken up from the most insane dream, but they realized that that all happened in real life. This person took this as a sign to start going to rehab. Next on the list we have starving yourself. This is actually something very common with people who suffer from insomnia. They lose the urge to eat because the body isn't functioning properly. If it gets really bad, you can start to get paranoid to the point where you think that people have been tampering with your food, and this can also be a reason that people will stop eating. I couldn't imagine how scary that would be. For one, I love food, so I wouldn't want anything to come into my life that would stop me from eating and enjoying food. On top of that, how would it feel if you were forcing yourself to eat because you know you're supposed to, but it literally makes you feel sick because you think there's something disgusting inside it? Even though your logical mind is telling you there's nothing wrong with your food, your paranoid mind is telling you the exact opposite. It sounds like a hell that I never want to experience. Right after that we have overeating. Now, rolling off our last point, you can actually have the exact opposite thing happen to you because you're so sleep deprived that you constantly feel the need to eat. There is an area of your brain known as the basal ganglia, or also called the lizard brain. This is the oldest part of the brain, and it is responsible for the most primal parts of your mind. Our fight or flight mechanism comes from this part of the brain. Many emotional connections are triggered in this part of the brain, and it can affect your appetite in a big way. When you are sleep deprived, you can have the urge to eat more unhealthy foods, things that are high in sugars, fats, and carbs. Your brain is telling you to eat more of these foods because your body is looking for instant energy because your mind is so tired. So when you're battling insomnia, you can start to see massive weight gain from the lack of sleep and your brain telling you to eat unhealthy food. When people are in a constant battle with insomnia, they can start to feel like they need to eat these unhealthy foods and will start overeating. On top of that, these unhealthy foods will attribute to the person's insomnia and it can become a vicious cycle. Next on the list we have self-harm. One story I read online talked about how a person got such bad insomnia that they started to have horrible hallucinations that something was under their skin. Having the feeling of bugs crawling under your skin or all over your body is a common symptom of someone who is severely sleep deprived. This person said that they started to feel bugs everywhere, but for a while they were able to fight it off and realize that it was only in their mind. But as things got worse, eventually they started scratching their own skin to get to the bugs that they thought were underneath. They couldn't help it. Luckily, they were able to snap out of it and get help before they did any serious damage to their body. After that, guys, we have running away from your family. We have come to this conclusion time and time again. If you get bad insomnia, it can lead to extreme cases of paranoia. In this case, we have a father who was working 3 jobs and trying to provide for his family. There was an insane amount of stress on his shoulders, and this led to him having insomnia and eventually a breakdown. The guy ran away from his whole family and never came back. They never got word of where he went, and he just abandoned his kids and his wife. And finally, guys, we have gave himself a heart attack. Here's something that I shouldn't have to say by now. We're at the end of part 2 of this series, but you need sleep. Unfortunately for people with insomnia, they know this, but they still can't sleep. They are staying up because they just can't fall asleep no matter what they do. And for Reddit user Roscoe Nighthat, they probably had the worst outcome possible. They were working as a bartender at a club that would open up at 9 and stay open till 6 a.m. And then some days they would go straight from their bar job right over to a second gig where they had to translate court documents. Not something you should be doing on no sleep. Well, this was hard to do, and anyone in the restaurant industry will tell you that it's easy to get into drugs, so that's what Roscoe did. They started taking drugs so they could stay up, and this led to some major health issues. Every now and again, they would get chest pains, but they would just push it off and keep moving forward. Well, people should listen to their bodies because eventually this person had a heart attack. They made it through it, but they were only 35 when this happened, and this was a very eye-opening experience for them. Alright guys, that has been our list. I've been your host, Chad Arena, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye. There is an area of your brain known as the basal ganglia. One story I read online talked about how a person got such a bad that the people they worked with could see that their health was deteriorating.